Welcome back to On Texas Football. I'm Jeff Howe, joined by CJ Vogel. Time to talk a little 2025 NFL Draft 3 weeks away. We are in the month of April. The draft starts on Thursday, April 24th. We'll talk about all rounds, look at the Longhorns who could be coming off the board in round 1, look at day 2, and even take time to look at day 3 and maybe some priority free agents. We'll do all that in this video. This video brought to you by Advanced Pain Care. We'll tell you a little bit more about Advanced Pain Care and hear a message from our friends at Advanced Pain Care here a little bit later in the show. But CJ, let's go ahead and start. I studied 10 different mock drafts that have been released in the last, let's say, 10 days. Just run them down real quick from ESPN.com, Field Yates, Matt Miller, and Mike Tannenbaum. From NFL Media, Lance Zierlein, Eric Edholm, Charles Davis, Bucky Brooks, and then from CBS Sports, Josh Edwards, Pete Prisco, Chris Trapasso. Let's start with the 3 Longhorns who are going to be in the first round, CJ, because the consensus is with all of these guys, all of these mocks, 3 Longhorns will go in the first round. That being Kelvin Banks, Matthew Golden, Janae Barron. When they go and where they go, nobody can agree on it. CJ, if you had the proverbial theoretical gun to your head right now, which of these Longhorns do you think comes off the board first?
It's Janae Barron for me. It is, and it's the most versatile defensive back in the class. It's the best defensive back in college football from 2024. You could throw him at nickel, cornerback, or safety and get a guy that'll play in the league for about 10 years. I think that is the safest bet. I think that's the guy who, again, with his versatility, there are no questions, right? He ran the 4.39. He checked every box at the pro day and the combine. This is the guy that you also want to represent your franchise. You know, we've talked about how much he's been used as the face of Texas football over his career here. That's my number one guy. I bet he goes in that top 13, 14 range. And I would expect him to be a guy that plays a very lengthy NFL career as well.
So Matt Miller, shout out to Matt Miller, by the way, his mock draft, it was a 7-round mock. He's got an interesting spot for Janae Barron. He's got Janae going 9th overall to the Saints. Terry Joseph, now the defensive pass game coordinator with the Saints. Bo Davis is the D-line coach. So in theory, 2 guys in the war room who can advocate for Janae. That's interesting. You've got 2 mocks have him going 11th to the 49ers. And then it gets wild, CJ. The latest he's going off of any out of any of these mocks, 2 ESPN mocks, Field Yates and Mike Tannenbaum have him going 24th to the Minnesota Vikings. I really hope he's gone before pick 24, but if he's there, man, you sprint to the podium and turn that card in. I just think, and Chris Trapasso has him going 21st to the Steelers. There was also Lance Zierlein had Janae going 21st, but to the Rams in a trade. But that 21st to the Steelers, CJ, I've said this since the process started. Teams that make really smart decisions on draft day consistently, the Packers, the Steelers, the Ravens, those franchises that have far more hits than they have misses, Janae Barron feels like one of those guys. He, in my opinion, he's one of the safest picks in this draft. So I don't think he gets past 21 to Pittsburgh.
I'd be shocked if he saw the 20s, but hey, I've always said if you're a defensive back and you get picked up by the Pittsburgh Steelers, that's one of the better spots I feel like any defensive back in college could end up. And I was so happy a year ago, Jeff, for Ryan Watts to end up in Pittsburgh. Obviously, he's been dealing with some injury luck up there as well, so it's been unfortunate we haven't seen him on the field. But again, for late round guys or for these top end dudes, places that you can go get maximized, get developed immediately. Pittsburgh's always been one of those spots, but I'd be shocked if he saw beyond 16 or into that 20 round.
Yeah, a couple mocks have him going 16 to Arizona. By the way, Deshaun Elliott back with the Steelers for another year. So some Longhorn ties there in that Steelers secondary. Let's go to Kelvin Banks, CJ, because teams are going to overthink it with him. And I've said this all along, and it unfortunately, it looks like that's coming to fruition because at first it was, well, how tall is he? How's the arm length? Is he going to have to kick inside? You were in Indianapolis at the combine when he got measured, and he's got the perfect body for an NFL tackle. He's right exactly where you'd want him. And as he's going through the process, suddenly it becomes, is he as dominating of a run blocker as like you'd like to see from a first-round tackle? I just feel like I hope that teams feel different about him than some of the folks doing the mocks do, because it's almost like they're trying to find things wrong with Kelvin Banks instead of just saying, this guy was a 3-year starter. He did it against elite level competition. In terms of a pass protector, in my opinion, he's a walk-in starter in the league. And if you're the Bears at 10 and you've got a potential franchise quarterback in Caleb Williams, you want to keep that guy upright. You don't want him to become David Carr and just, get the what beat out of him early in his career. So there's a couple landing spots, 10 to the Bears, a couple mock. Lance Zierlein has him going 11th to San Francisco. I've talked about that Trent Williams transition where you can start Kelvin Banks opposite him, and then when Trent Williams retires, boom, you've got your left tackle now for the future. Bucky Brooks and Chris Trapasso have him going 13 to the Dolphins. I've heard that spot. But CJ, 3 of these mocks, Mike Tannenbaum, Eric Edholm, and Josh Edwards, have Kelvin Banks falling all the way to the mid-20s. And I'm telling you, I think if he is at 25, and when the Houston Texans are on the clock, D'Amico Ryans, Nick Caserio, everybody in that war room should be jumping for joy because you've got CJ Stroud, you just traded Laramie Tunsil. Your new franchise left tackle might have just landed in your lap.
Yeah, 100%. I think 25 is probably that safe floor, right? Because, again, the Texans, for as bad as that offensive line was a year ago, Jeff, I mean, they've completely revamped. They basically pushed everybody out of the door and said, we're going to build from scratch. You need a franchise left tackle. You thought you had one with Laramie Tunsil. You probably got a little fed up with all of the penalties. He led the league in penalties a year ago. Now you're saying, all right, let's build. We got our quarterback for the future. We got a great receiving course. Now let's keep this guy upright. So, yeah, that makes sense. 25 is probably that back end. But for Kelvin Banks specifically, it's been an odd build-up to the draft because, he was a top 10 guy. And then for whatever reason, every mock draft, every new rendition, he's been lower and lower and lower. And it wasn't for anything off the field. It wasn't for anything on the field. It was just because, hey, it's the job of scouts and these draft folk to figure out what's best for franchises and to find any little bit of a detail to knock a player or to not draft them. So for Kelvin Banks, what is that one reason? Certainly not his production on the field or what we've seen over the last 3 years. I could go through a whole laundry list of defensive ends and linebackers that he's faced and stonewalled. But for me, the one question that maybe hasn't been answered yet is, does he have that top 10, top 15 athleticism that you see with a Trent Williams, that you see with some of these long-term Lane Johnson type of offensive linemen? And that's where the difference is right now between a Membaugh from Missouri and a Will Campbell is look, those guys both scratched about 4.98, whatever, in their 40s. That's 0.2 faster than what Kelvin Banks ran. And I know 40-yard dash times, that doesn't mean a whole lot when it comes to offensive linemen. But when you look at those explosive and when you look at those elite athletic traits for offensive linemen, I think that's where he's getting the hit. But 25, that's the floor.
Armand Membaugh of Missouri might be, and it's going to be 3 SEC tackles that are the first 3 tackles to go in this draft. He might be the first tackle off the board. It just seems, CJ, there's not that slam dunk. There's not a Trent Williams in this draft. There's not that no doubt, hey, this guy's a future Hall of Fame type tackle. There's not a Tyron Smith in this draft, at least on paper. It just seems like, based on the mocks, teams right around that 10-11 range, it's almost like it's a staring contest and nobody wants to blink first and have to decide which of these tackles to take. Right. I think the teams drafting in the later teens and into the 20s, I think they're fine with whichever one falls to them, and the Texans could benefit from that from Kelvin Banks. Guy from humble Summer Creek, that's where he played his high school ball, college ball at Texas, going back to Houston. By the way, CJ, the Dallas Cowboys, the other franchise in this state, who those of us who are fans of the Cowboys who suffered for a minute. CJ, would you like to take a guess, or actually would it surprise you to know that the last time the Cowboys used a first-round pick to select a Texas product, 1964, when they drafted Scott Appleton 4th overall, and he never played a snap for the Cowboys because he was taken 6th by the Oilers in the AFL draft and ended up signing with the Oilers. So that shows you your first-round history with the Cowboys and guys from Texas. But 2 of these 10 mocks I looked at have Matthew Golden going to the Cowboys. Why the Cowboys need a receiver among their needs, I don't know. But the best spot for him, CJ, and his floor, one of these mocks has him going 29 to Washington, which, man, if I'm Jaden Daniels and I just got the fastest wide receiver in the draft, I'm feeling pretty good about my 2025 season, not having that sophomore slump.
Right.
3 of the mocks have him going to the Seahawks at 18. They just signed Sam Darnold for a lot of money in free agency. They traded away DK Metcalf. They released Tyler Lockett. Yes, they brought in Cooper Kupp, but Sam Darnold may need a shiny new target. And what better way to get him one, CJ, than the fastest wide receiver in the draft?
Yeah, I mean, you look at the separation, you look at his route running ability, that alone would get you drafted pretty high in this draft, probably at the back end of the first round. But you throw a 4.2 tag next to all of that, Jeff, and whew, you're looking at a pretty elite prospect. Now, it's going to be interesting, right? Because it's felt like for the last year and a half, the build up to, Travis Hunter, a Luther Burden, or a Ted McMillan, that would be where your conversation would come for the first, second, and third wide receivers off the board. And here comes Golden after a tremendous second half of the season where not only his route running ability was on display, but Jeff, I think he has some of the best hands that you'll see in this draft as well, right? The body control passes down the sideline, the body control over the middle, and the hands to hold on some of these really tough hits that we saw on passes from Quinn Ewers this year. Look, hey, complete package. Now, I think, again, I look at guys like a Brian Thomas Jr., I look at a guy like Malik Neighbors. Could they benefit from having a speedster like him on the inside? Or could you just throw him opposite and say, hey, we got a heck of a tandem here? I've kind of had that same mantra for an Isaiah Bond, but for Matthew Golden, I think, again, you see the teens, you see the back end of the 20s. If he goes to a contender, and I mean the team that just made the playoffs this past year, he's going to put up some big-time numbers because that means they got an offensive line, they've got a quarterback already in place.
Yeah, and, it's funny. It seems like Matthew Golden is rising for the reason Kelvin Banks is falling. Maybe the testing numbers aren't there for Banks, and he's being nitpicked way too much.
Yeah.
Teams are overthinking it. And the testing numbers are there for Matthew Golden, and his teams get into the tape. Like you said, all the things you just mentioned, it's like teams are just now seeing it, and
he's good.
He may be going from CJ like a second, maybe third round guy when this process started to now. He may be the first wide receiver off the board.
And what's crazy is this, Texas fans say, why did it take so long for Texas to realize this guy was so good? And it's like, well, you had another guy in the conversation coming into the year that was expected to be in this conversation of a top 5 wide receiver taken. And he still might be, right? Depending on fit, how this draft falls out, right? But I'm looking back at Houston saying this guy only had 800 career yards in 2 years, saying, what were y'all doing, right? Yeah. I know Tank Dell was there for a year, but my point being is that's a heck of an athlete. And again, I know that there's been some murmurs, and I kind of back it up, Jeff. The speed that we saw in Indianapolis, I don't know if we ever truly saw that on full display. I had that same take about Adonai Mitchell a year ago.
Yeah.
Does that knock him? Because, hey, straight line speed, football speed, that's all something else that you normally see on the flip side the other way around, saying a guy's faster. But point being, you get the whole package of Matthew Golden.
Yeah, I just don't think he was, because let's face it, Quinn Ewers' forte was not the deep ball.
Right.
So you really didn't ask him to do that. Same thing with Isaiah Bond. You really didn't ask him to be the target on a lot of deep shots with Quinn Ewers at quarterback. So something for teams to figure out with both those guys. CJ, we'll run these down real quick. In all these mocks, Alfred Collins, the ones that were multi-round mocks, Alfred Collins going in the second round in all 3. One's got him going 64 to the Eagles. Like the Eagles need another good defensive lineman. The Kansas City Chiefs haven't drafted a defensive tackle since Keandre Coburn. Josh Edwards at CBS has them taking Collins 63rd overall. And then Matt Miller's got him going 46 to the Falcons, being back up with Bijan Robinson. Both those guys signed at Texas as 5-star prospects back in 2020. Now they could be top 2-round draft picks together in Atlanta. We'll see how that works out. CJ, are you cool with Alfred Collins going second round? Because I think this is more of, hey, there's going to be a run on defensive linemen, and I think somebody's just going to need to grab him, even though maybe he didn't have the testing numbers we wanted to see. And for pro day, he was in a boot. So I'm kind of an incomplete pre-draft process for Alfred Collins.
Yeah, it's kind of similar to T'Vondre Sweat. Now, T'Vondre Sweat, of course, was packing what? You throw anywhere from 350 to 375 pounds at the time. Alfred, obviously not that big, but the testing numbers weren't there, and we didn't get a chance to see him again at the pro day. What we did get to see, and what, again, I look back to T'Vondre Sweat and his draft build-up process was the on-field drills at the combine. You came away saying, that guy can move for his size. That was the case for Tavondre. That was certainly the case coming out of Indianapolis when I was speaking with a number of draft scouts and media folks saying, whoa, Alfred Collins is how big, and he's doing what? So I know that the jumping, the explosive numbers might not match up to a guy that can have that elite athleticism, but he certainly does, and he has that 5-star pedigree. But Jeff, I'll ask you this, because I know that we talk about second round and how many X number of Longhorns could be in this position. Mm-hmm. I have a very sneaky suspicion that we see Isaiah Bond going very early in comparison to a lot of these mock drafts and kind of the buzz around him right now.
Yeah, Matt Miller has him going 74th at the third round to the Panthers. I think the big thing with Isaiah Bond is he healthy? Is that ankle all the way back? And if it is, how many teams that had him, with a first round grade early on, circle back and say, you know what? It's not an exceptional year at receiver. And if you miss out on Golden, McMillan, or Burden, or Emeka Ibuka, who's probably going to be another receiver that goes in the first round, at least late in the first round, and maybe you do take Isaiah Bond in the second round. You say, hey, we'd like to take him in the third round. And this is what we forget about the draft. A team may like a guy and say, okay, we can maybe get him in the third round. But then as the draft unfolds, you say, you know what? We need to come out of here with a receiver. We need to take him with our second round pick because he won't be there by the time we're on the clock in the third round. And you might not want to trade future draft capital to maneuver to get him. So just something to think about with Isaiah Bond. The last one we'll talk about, and then we'll do rapid fire with the others. Quinn Ewers, 2 of the 3 multi-round mocks. Matt Miller's got him going 40th overall to the Saints. Josh Edwards, 90th overall in the third round to Carolina. CJ, I don't know where Quinn's stock is right now. The pro day, I don't think did anything to, cause it to go, elevate, inflate, or deflate. I just don't know where Quinn's stock is right now. And I've seen some mocks where in positional rankings where not only is Jackson Dart now ahead of Quinn in the pecking order, a lot of people are starting to think Tyler Shuck is ahead of Quinn in the pecking order. And there's some buzz that Will Howard might go before Quinn. That's kind of hard for me to believe, but that's just where things are at with Quinn right now. Like I said, I don't know that the pro day, I don't think it hurt him, but it didn't necessarily help him either.
Yeah, I think with the pro day, if you're at a blackjack table, Jeff, you're seeing the dealer pat the table twice saying, hey, that's a push, right? You don't lose anything, but you certainly don't win anything. And again, that was kind of the opportunity and the setting in which you were hoping Quinn came away with some of that big time buzz and ultimate step forward getting picked earlier in the draft. But again, I go back to what we knew about Quinn. The deep ball wasn't there, but everything else in between is going to be where it needs to be. Now, is that technique? Is that just strength? Is that just not having it mentally? I don't know. I don't have the answers for you. I wish I did, but we would be talking about a different quarterback over the last 2 or 3 years. So that's kind of where we're at. One thing I think that is interesting is Dan Orlovsky got on ESPN the other day, Jeff, and said, hey, I think Jackson Dart's a top 10 pick by the end of this. If that's the case, I think you'll see Quinn Ewers go much earlier than what you might expect. Now, again, I'm not expecting a top 10 selection for Jackson Dart, but this isn't a great quarterback class, and the guys that you all mentioned, very limited in their own right. Tyler Shuck has battled injuries for 6 years in college. Will Howard, look, just came off of a national championship, Jeff, but you could go down the list of that Ohio State roster saying how deep down the list is he actually responsible for them winning this national championship. He hasn't yet been the guy that, and even at Kansas State, he was Will Spill the Pill, as Rod likes to call him. So I think for Quinn, someone's going to view him as a long-term backup before leading him into that kind of starting role if they have a guy already. And that's going to be something that you see like a Jordan Love. You just pick up, you stash, and you say, all right, let's build for the next couple of years.
Yeah, and a team like the Saints, that to me would be a good fit. Kellen Moore's a first-year head coach. Maybe he can grow with him, grow with that offense, and then get a chance at some point. CJ, on these now Field Yates was only a 2-round mock, so that's why some of these guys aren't mentioned in all 3. But Andrew Makuba and Cameron Williams are kind of consensus 3rd-round type guys right now. Isaiah Bond is in the 3rd round in one of these. Josh Edwards has Vernon Broughton going in the 3rd. Matt Miller has him going in the 5th. So I think that's probably where you get the cutoff. So I think your guys on day 2, it's looking like Collins, Ewers, Makuba, Bond, and Williams. I think those 5 guys really are pretty much locks, I think, at this point to go on day 2. CJ, that's 8 guys in the top 100, 8 of the first 100 picks. That no matter what happens on day 3, that's a hell of a draft for Texas.
Yeah, it's a big win. And again, it's one thing to see the results of a back-to-back top 4 finish in college football, but it's another thing to say, hey, recruits, remember that whole Texas can't develop thing? Well, that's completely gone. You look at back-to-back school records sending to the combine. Well, it's about to be back-to-back school records of hearing guys' names drafted into the NFL. So that whole development talk, I think, is a long ways in the past for Steve Sarkisian and his coaching staff. So it's a great sign for Texas. Now it's about getting over the hump. And that's where number 1 recruiting class in this next 2025 Texas Longhorn team, well, let's see what they can do.
All right, CJ, we'll finish up our draft talk, but before we do, here's a word from our newest sponsor here at On Texas Football, Advanced Pain Care.
Pros know the pain stops here.
Physical therapy helps me as an athlete then and now. And do I still need therapy? Yes. Advanced Pain Care helps with that.
Injuries will stack up. They'll add up. You can't let those injuries get you down, and Advanced Pain Care has been very helpful for me.
We can help with whatever's got you down, from nerve damage to our spinal cord stimulator. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. Same-day appointments available.
Advanced Pain Care. The pain stops here.
All right. Thanks to Advanced Pain Care for sponsoring this show. CJ, I mentioned Vernon Broughton, 1 3rd-round projection, 1 5th-round projection. Hayden Connor's got a 6th-round projection from Matt Miller in that 7-round mock, but I'll stick with the Matt Miller mock to finish it off. Gunnar Helm, Barron Sorrell, Jake Majors, Jaden Blue, all going in the 4th round. If that happens, CJ, Texas will break the school record for draft picks before the 4th round is in the books. That is, I think that, and you and I were talking while we were recording, but I think we were talking while we were recording Bases Loaded and talking about, hey, how would you judge talent on, this kind of run of teams with 2023, 2024, what we think is going to be what Texas will have in 2025, and then looking ahead even to 2026. I think as talented as the 2023 team was, I think you'll look at the 2024 team and think just in terms of pure talent, somehow you lost 11 draft picks and were more talented.
Yeah, it's going to be something that I think haunts Texas fans for a little while. At the pro day, I even heard a player just say, I can't believe we didn't win it all after seeing Quinn throw to all the wide receivers, tight ends, and running backs. So it makes sense. But again, it's a great sign that Texas is in another great era. And it's certainly not close to finishing yet when you got Arch Manning waiting in the fold. So can they get over the top? Can they win that national championship? Well, they're in a good spot to get just back there and do the thing. So we'll have to wait and see.
All right. And we'll be tracking that here on the channel and at ontexasfootball.com. Big thanks to Advanced Pain Care again for sponsoring this show. And thank you, CJ, for all your insights and stopping by to talk a little NFL draft. For CJ, I'm Jeff Howe. Until next time, hook 'em.